why is he still here?" Mia's voice cut through the silence of the house as Lisa, surprised, slowly turned around. Her daughter stood at the bedroom door, clutching her worn-out teddy bear tightly. Mia's gaze was distant, as if she were speaking to someone only she could see. Lisa shivered but tried to maintain her composure. "Who's still here, sweetheart?" she asked, struggling to stay calm even though her heart was racing. Mia didn't respond immediately. She just stared at the dark corner of the room where the shadows seemed denser than they should be. It had been 2 months since Lisa and Mark had moved to Ashfield, looking for a fresh start after a long battle with infertility. The couple, now living in an old house far from the city, had finally adopted Mia, a 7-year-old girl. From the beginning, something about the house seemed off. Lisa couldn't quite pinpoint what it was, but the atmosphere felt heavy, as if the walls whispered secrets no one should ever hear. "He's over there," Mia said, pointing to the dark corner of the room. "He told me he doesn't like it when you turn off the light." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She moved closer to her daughter, trying to shake off the discomfort. "Mia, there's no one there. Let's go to bed, okay? Tomorrow is a new day and you have school." She smiled, but it was a forced smile, more for herself than for the girl. Mia hesitated for a moment before turning back to bed, but not without glancing once more at the corner, frowning in a way that was unsettling for someone so young. The house was too big for the 3 of them, and that made Lisa uncomfortable. When they bought the property, she had been charmed by its decayed beauty and the affordable price, without questioning why it had been on the market for so long. It seemed like the perfect home to start a family. Now, however, every hallway felt darker, and every creaking door seemed to have a purpose. At night, the feeling that something was watching them became almost unbearable. Mark, as usual, ignored Lisa's fears. He attributed everything to Mia's adjustment period. "It's normal for kids to have imaginary friends," he would say, with his usual practical approach, trying to downplay the growing unease that Lisa felt. But Lisa knew something was wrong. In the past few days, Mia had started talking about a friend, someone named Daniel. At first, Lisa thought it was sweet that the girl was inventing stories, but as time went on, the intensity with which Mia mentioned Daniel became unsettling. The girl acted as if he were there with her all the time. Sometimes, when Lisa walked into the room, Mia would abruptly stop a conversation as if she had been caught doing something wrong. Lisa started to notice small, disturbing details. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. Mia's room, in particular, seemed to have a different aura, a cold, dense energy. It was as if the air around it was charged with something invisible, something that didn't belong there. One night, while Mark was at work, Lisa heard giggles coming from Mia's room. The sound made her stop in the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. She opened the door slowly and found Mia sitting on the bed, her eyes fixed on the corner of the room. She was laughing, but her laugh wasn't childlike. It was different. "What's going on, Mia?" Lisa asked, trying to control the tremor in her voice. Mia didn't respond immediately. She just looked again at the corner where the darkness seemed thicker than ever. After a long silence, Mia turned to Lisa and whispered, "Daniel is here." Lisa stood frozen at the door, the silence in the room thick with tension. She knew children often invented imaginary friends, but something about Mia's behavior was different. Daniel wasn't just a made-up friend to cope with loneliness. There was an intensity in Mia's eyes, a disturbing conviction in her words. "Sweetheart, can you tell me more about Daniel?" Lisa asked, trying to stay calm as she felt the lump in her throat tighten. Mia glanced back at the corner where the darkness seemed to gather. She nodded slightly as if listening to someone speak. "He doesn't want you to know," the girl replied in a casual tone that made Lisa's stomach churn. "He only talks to me." Lisa felt a sudden chill sweep through her body. The temperature in the room seemed to drop every time Daniel was mentioned. She was about to press for more questions, but Mia's expression changed. Her eyes suddenly filled with discomfort. "He's angry now. I think you should leave," Mia said, her voice cold, almost commanding for a child. Lisa swallowed hard, unable to shake the feeling that she was being pushed out by an invisible presence. She took a step back, unable to hide the growing fear that engulfed her. "Okay, sweetheart, we'll talk about this later, all right?" she said, forcing a smile as she turned to leave the room. When she closed the door, Lisa paused for a moment in the hallway, leaning against the wall trying to steady her racing breath. She didn't know what was happening, but something was wrong. Very wrong. That night, Lisa tried to talk to Mark about Mia's behavior, but as usual, he downplayed the situation. They were in the kitchen, him sipping his evening coffee while reviewing some work reports, seemingly oblivious to Lisa's concerns. Lisa, she's just a kid. She's adjusting to the new house, to the new environment. Kids go through this all the time. Imaginary friends are common, especially after they've been through so much like she has. Mark took another sip of coffee and continued without looking at his wife. I don't think we should worry too much. But you're not seeing what I'm seeing, Lisa exclaimed, her frustration building. She's acting. Strange. Her room gets cold every time she talks about this, Daniel. And today she practically kicked me out because she said he was mad at me. This isn't normal, Mark. He finally looked at Lisa, his eyes showing more fatigue than concern. Lisa, we're dealing with a girl who came from an orphanage. She's trying to adjust to a new reality. Maybe she's making up stories to feel in control. We need to give her time to settle in, he said, completely unaware of the weight Lisa felt on her shoulders. Despite Mark's words, Lisa couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing inside her. She knew something deeper was happening. In the past few weeks, Mia had become more reserved, often spending hours locked in her room. Sometimes Lisa would hear long conversations from the other side of the door, as if Mia were having a full dialogue with someone invisible. That same night, around 3 a.m, Lisa woke up with a start. Her body covered in cold sweat, she could hear muffled laughter. The sound seemed to come from the hallway. She got up slowly, moving toward the bedroom door, her heart racing. As she walked down the hall, she realized the laughter was coming from Mia's room. Stopping at the door, Lisa heard Mia talking, but her voice was different. It was deeper, with a distant, almost threatening tone. Grabbing the doorknob, she carefully opened the door. Mia was sitting on the bed, her eyes half closed, staring intently at the corner of the room. Mia, who are you talking to? Lisa asked, trying to keep the panic from her voice. Mia slowly turned to her mother, her expression cold, devoid of any childish emotion. Daniel said you shouldn't have woken up. Lisa slowly closed Mia's bedroom door, her heart pounding so hard it seemed to echo in the silence of the hallway. Her daughter's words kept reverberating in her mind. Daniel said you shouldn't have woken up. Something was terribly wrong, and the feeling that the entire house was turning against her only grew stronger. The next morning, Lisa got up determined to find out what was happening. Mark had already left for work and Mia was at school. The house was quiet, but there was a weight in the air, as if Daniel's presence was still there. Lurking, Lisa decided to start her investigation with an internet search about the house's history. Sitting at the kitchen table with an untouched cup of coffee, Lisa typed the address into the search bar. The results that appeared were vague mentions of the house. Nothing concrete. But after an hour of intense research, one name caught her attention. Daniel Carter. There was an old newspaper article, almost 40 years old. An 8-year-old boy named Daniel had died in the house under mysterious circumstances. The article was short, just a footnote mentioning his death with no clear details. The only thing Lisa could gather was that Daniel's death had been ruled an accident, but his body was never found. Never found? Lisa whispered, her fingers trembling as she closed the laptop. She felt a chill run through her body. The name Daniel Carter sounded like a curse, a shadow that still hung over the house. Maybe it wasn't a coincidence that Mia's imaginary friend was named Daniel. Everything was starting to fall into place, but in a horrible way. That afternoon, Lisa went to the Ashfield Library. The librarian, a gray-haired woman with a curious gaze, helped her access old files. The more Lisa read about the Carter family tragedy, the more disturbed she became. There was something strange about the family. Daniel's mother, Margaret Carter, had disappeared shortly after her son's death. No trace of her whereabouts had been found, and the few records indicated that she was an unstable woman, prone to emotional breakdowns and occult practices. Lisa began to understand that something much darker was at play in that house. Daniel's death and Margaret's disappearance had never been fully explained. The rumors among the older residents suggested that Margaret had tried to perform a ritual to bring Daniel back. But something had gone wrong. Whatever it was, it had left an indelible mark on the house. As she read about the Carter family's tragic past, Lisa felt the weight of it all crashing down on her. Daniel wasn't just a simple spirit. He was a presence trapped between worlds, seeking something. and he seemed to have chosen Mia as the means to achieve his goal. That night, the atmosphere in the house felt different. Mark tried to talk to Lisa, but she was distracted, too absorbed in her discoveries to pay attention. Mia, on the other hand, seemed quieter than usual. She stayed in her room most of the time, and Lisa avoided going in there. The feeling that Daniel was waiting, lurking, made the air feel too heavy to breathe. As Lisa lay in bed, her mind kept returning to the name Margaret Carter. Something about the idea that she had tried to bring her son back made Lisa shiver. Was that what Daniel was trying to do? Was he trying to return in some way through Mia? Lisa's thoughts were interrupted by a sound that echoed through the house. A slow, continuous creak. She froze, feeling the blood in her veins turn to ice. The sound was coming from upstairs, from Mia's room. Rising carefully, Lisa left the bedroom, trying not to wake Mark. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking under her feet. The hallway was cloaked in shadows, and the only light came from a dim lamp at the end of the hall. When she reached Mia's door, the feeling of something sinister completely engulfed her. The doorknob was cold to the touch. Lisa opened the door slowly, dreading what she would find. Mia stood in the middle of the room, her back to the door. The teddy bear hung limply in her hand as she stared fixedly at the wall. Lisa couldn't move, her legs felt glued to the floor. "Mia," she murmured, but the girl didn't respond. Slowly, Mia turned her head, her eyes empty and distant. She didn't look like herself. The silence in the room was crushing, and Lisa felt Daniel's presence hovering there, invisible but palpable. "He's here again, Mommy," Mia said, her voice emotionless. He said he's coming back." The room was filled with a crushing tension, as if the very air was suffocating Lisa. She stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what was happening before her eyes. Mia was there, but something in her had profoundly changed. The tone of her voice, the vacant and distant look. It was as if her daughter had become a stranger. "What do you mean, he's coming back?" Lisa asked, her voice barely holding together. Mia, still clutching her teddy bear, turned slowly to face her mother, a disturbing smile spreading across her lips. "Daniel wants to stay with me, Mommy. He said he's coming back to finish what he started," Mia said calmly, but her voice held a strange depth, something far beyond her age. "He said he needs me." Lisa felt the panic rising inside her, but she knew she couldn't show fear. Her daughter was being manipulated by something far beyond what she could comprehend, something that wasn't just a product of a child's imagination. "Mia, Daniel isn't here. He can't hurt you," Lisa said, trying to stay calm, even though every fiber of her being was screaming for her to run from that house. Mia blinked slowly, as if considering her mother's words before finally saying, "He says you're wrong." Lisa swallowed hard. The coldness in Mia's tone, mixed with that supernatural certainty, made her heart race. Something had to be done, and quickly. Mia was no longer just a victim of a creative mind. Daniel was manifesting in a concrete way, as if he had forged a deeper connection with the girl. That night, Lisa barely slept. Next to Mark, who slept soundly and, as always, seemed unaware of the growing terror around them, Lisa thought about everything she had read about Daniel and his mother, Margaret Carter. If the stories were true, Daniel was trying to connect with the living world, and Mia was his bridge. In the middle of the night, Lisa woke up suddenly to a low, repetitive sound, like something scraping against the walls. She got up slowly, her body tense and her senses on high alert. The sound seemed to be coming from Mia's room. Feeling the panic rise, she rushed down the hallway and opened the door with a quick push. The sight that greeted her was bone-chilling. Mia was standing next to the wall, using a broken piece of wood from some toy to scratch at the plaster. Her hand was red, almost raw, but she didn't seem to feel any pain. Her eyes were glazed over, and she was writing something repeatedly. "Daniel is coming back." The words were carved into the walls in rough, uneven letters. Lisa ran to Mia, grabbing her by the shoulders and trying to make her stop, but the girl didn't even seem to notice her mother's presence. "Mia, stop this!" Lisa cried, the desperation clear in her voice. But Mia just looked over her shoulder at her mother, with a blank, distant gaze, as if she wasn't entirely there. And then, she smiled. "I told you, Mommy, he's coming back." Lisa let go of Mia, stepping back in horror. Her heart was racing so fast she thought she might pass out at any moment. She ran out of the room, desperately needing air. The words carved into the wall still echoed in her mind. She knew something much darker was happening, something she could no longer ignore. The next morning, Lisa decided to take action. If she didn't do something, she would lose Mia forever. Not just to the entity that was Daniel, but also to the world of the dead that seemed to be drawing ever closer to her home. She sat at the breakfast table with Mark, determined to tell him everything. While he focused on the newspaper, Lisa began. "Mark, we need to talk." He glanced at her, a bit impatient, as if he already knew what she would say. But this time Lisa wasn't going to let him dismiss her. "Mia is writing on the walls horrible things. She's talking like she's not herself. This isn't normal." Her voice was shaky but full of conviction. Mark sighed, setting the newspaper aside. "Lisa, I've told you, she's been through a lot. Maybe this is her way of coping. I don't think it's anything supernatural." "Are you listening to me?" Lisa nearly shouted. "Mia is being controlled by something. This isn't just imagination or adjustment." "I read about the history of this house. Daniel's mother, the woman who lived here before us, she tried to bring her son back. But something went wrong and now he's trapped here and he wants to use our daughter." Mark looked at her, the skepticism slowly disappearing. For the first time, he seemed to consider that something truly wrong was happening. But before he could respond, a child's laughter echoed from Mia's room. It was a laugh that didn't belong to her. The laughter echoed through the walls of the house like muffled thunder, each reverberation soaking the air with a malignant presence. Lisa and Mark stood frozen for a moment, paralyzed in place. It wasn't Mia's laugh. There was something ancient, something deeply unsettling in that sound. Mark stood up, his skepticism slowly eroding under the weight of fear. This isn't normal, Lisa," Mark finally admitted, his voice trembling. "I told you this isn't just imagination. Daniel is trying to come back and Mia is the channel he's chosen," Lisa said urgently, feeling the need to resolve this before it was too late. Without thinking twice, Lisa rushed to Mia's room with Mark following closely behind. When they opened the door, they found Mia sitting on the bed, staring at the floor, her hands folded in her lap. The silence that followed the laughter was even more disturbing, as if the room had been emptied of any trace of life. Mia's teddy bear lay discarded beside the bed, a symbol of what the girl should be, but no longer was. "Mia?" Mark called out hesitantly, his voice nearly suffocated by the weight of the atmosphere. Mia slowly lifted her face, her gaze clouded, and began rocking her head from side to side in a rhythmic, mechanical motion. She didn't say a word, but the room felt colder, more oppressive. Lisa could feel Daniel's presence there, watching, waiting for something. It was then that Lisa knew she needed deeper answers. Beyond what she had already read at the library, Margaret Carter, Daniel's mother, had performed some sort of ritual in that place. If Lisa could figure out what went wrong, maybe she could stop Daniel from completing his return. Lisa grabbed Mark by the arm and pulled him out of the room, closing the door behind her. "We need to go back to the attic," Lisa said, her voice determined. "There's more stuff up there, diaries, documents. I only skimmed through before, but now I know it's the key to understanding what's going on." In the attic, amid old boxes and dusty furniture, Lisa and Mark frantically searched. The sense of urgency drove them, as if they knew time was quickly running out. After a frantic search, Lisa found what she was looking for. An old leather-bound notebook with the initials MC engraved on the front. It was Margaret Carter's diary. Lisa opened the diary with trembling hands. The first pages were normal day-to-day accounts, but as she moved through the entries, Margaret's words became more erratic, more disturbing. She wrote about how Daniel's death had shattered her sanity, and how, desperate to bring him back, she had turned to old rituals she found in an occult book. "I tried to bring him back," Lisa read aloud, her voice almost breaking. "He was so close, I almost had him. But something went wrong. Now he's trapped between worlds and he wants to come back. I heard him. He wants a body, he needs a body. And he won't rest until he gets one." The last words of the diary were almost illegible, frantic, confused scribbles that revealed Margaret's mental deterioration. But what became clear to Lisa was that the ritual had failed, leaving Daniel in some sort of limbo, trapped between the living world and the dead, waiting for the chance to complete the process. "My God," Mark whispered, looking at the diary. "This is all real. He's trying to use Mia to come back." Lisa snapped the diary shut as if the weight of what she had just read was too much to bear. They didn't have much time. Daniel was getting stronger, and Mia was falling deeper under his control. "We have to stop him, Mark. We need to figure out how to break this connection," Lisa said, fighting to keep her voice steady. They knew the solution lay in the final rituals described in the diary. Margaret had left clues describing what she had tried and what had failed. If they could find a way to undo the bond between Mia and Daniel, maybe they could save her before it was too late. Lisa returned to Mia's room with the diary in hand, determined to face whatever was lurking. The girl was now lying in bed, her eyes closed, but her face looked tense, as if she was fighting a battle within herself. The air in the room felt colder, denser. "Daniel, you can't have her," Lisa muttered, flipping through the diary, searching for something that could undo what had been done. She knew it was a race against time, and that with every passing minute Daniel was closer to completing his possession. The house groaned violently as if it were alive, responding to the impending confrontation. The darkness in the corner of the room seemed to pulse, growing and shifting, as if Daniel's presence was trying to manifest. Lisa knew that if she failed, she would lose Mia forever. The whole house seemed to hold its breath. Every crack in the walls, every creak in the floor echoed like a warning, a reminder of what was coming. Lisa clutched Margaret Carter's diary tightly, as if it were her last anchor to reality. She knew she couldn't waste any more time. Mark entered Mia's room right behind her, his face marked by fear, but now he finally believed the skepticism had melted away, replaced by pure terror. Mia lay on the bed, but she didn't seem to be sleeping. Her body was tense, rigid, as if locked in an internal struggle, and her breathing was heavy and irregular. "We have to do this now, Lisa," Mark muttered, his gaze fixed on their daughter, "before it's too late." Lisa opened the diary with trembling hands and began reading Margaret Carter's final notes aloud, following the details of the ritual she had started but never finished. The ancient words, mixed with phrases in an unfamiliar language, sounded strange, almost unsettling as they echoed through the room. The house seemed to tremble in response, as if a force was being disturbed. Suddenly Mia opened her eyes, but they were not the eyes of a child. The look she gave Lisa and Mark was cold, empty, completely inhuman. "You think you can stop me?" The voice that came from Mia's mouth wasn't hers. It was deep, with a threatening tone that made Lisa take a step back involuntarily. "I've waited a long time for this. You can't stop him." "It's not you, Mia. I know it's not you," Lisa shouted, trying to maintain control as she continued reading the ritual. The words tumbled out, but she had to keep going. Daniel was there inside Mia, but she knew her daughter was still fighting. She could see it in the tension on the girl's face, the slight tremor in her hands. "Daniel, you can't stay," Lisa said firmly, trying to confront the entity directly. "You don't belong in this world." Mia laughed, or rather Daniel laughed. The sound was cold, sharp, like breaking glass in the silence. "Belong? I've always belonged. This house is mine. She is mine." The last word was spoken with crushing intensity. The lights began to flicker violently, and the shadows on the walls became denser, almost tangible, as if something was trying to manifest physically. Mia's room, which once seemed like a refuge, was now a battleground between the living world and the dead. Mark, who had remained silent until now, mustered the courage to approach the bed, reaching out for their daughter. "Mia, we're here. You have to fight. Don't let him take you," he said, his voice breaking but filled with desperation. For a brief moment, Mia's body relaxed and her eyes seemed to shine with a glimmer of recognition. But then, the entity manifested with greater force, and Mia was thrown backward against the headboard, as if she were being pulled by an invisible force. "He's almost here," Mia whispered, her voice an echo of Daniel's, her eyes twisting between fear and malice. "I feel him. He's coming back." Lisa frantically turned the page of the diary and found what she was looking for: the instructions to complete the ritual and seal the portal between worlds. The final words were clear: the sacrifice must be made. Lisa's blood ran cold. What Margaret had failed to complete, what had gone wrong, was a sacrifice. Something or someone had to be offered to close the portal and prevent Daniel or any other entity from returning. But the sacrifice wasn't clear. "Sacrifice? What does that mean?" Mark asked, looking at Lisa with panic in his eyes. Before she could answer, Mia began to convulse on the bed, her body being pulled in impossible directions, as if Daniel's very force was trying to tear her soul from her body. The shadows in the room churned, growing until they almost engulfed the entire bed. Lisa knew what she had to do. She tossed the diary aside and ran to Mia, grabbing her hand as the shadows threatened to swallow them both. Lisa looked into Mia's eyes and whispered, If someone has to be sacrificed, it will be me, Daniel. You won't have my daughter. Take me, but Mia stays. There was a moment of absolute silence, and then a cold wind swept through the room. The shadows retreated for a second, hesitating. Mia opened her eyes, her true voice emerging for a brief moment. "Mommy, no," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. But before Mia could say anything else, Daniel's presence returned with full force. The shadows exploded around them and the entire room shook. The entity was manifesting completely now, ready to take whatever it needed. Lisa felt the weight of the darkness pressing down on her, crushing her soul, but she didn't back down. She was ready to sacrifice everything if it meant saving her daughter. And then, from within the storm of shadows, a faint light began to glow. Not a physical light, but a sensation of warmth, as if a force stronger than Daniel was manifesting. The shadows churned, roaring in fury, but the light continued to grow, radiating from Mia's body, expelling the darkness. Still holding Mia's hand, Lisa began to speak the final words of the ritual, her voice trembling but steady. "You can't have her!" And in a final desperate moment, Daniel was ripped from the room, his shadows crumbling as Mia broke free from his control. The house grew quiet. The air felt lighter. Daniel was gone. The silence that followed Daniel's expulsion was oppressive. It was as if the entire house had been suspended in a fragile moment of stillness, as though the darkness had only fallen asleep, but never truly left. Lisa and Mark knelt beside Mia's bed, still trying to process what had just happened. Mia, weak and pale, began to stir, her eyes returning to normal, though still reflecting the trauma of the experience. Lisa gently held her daughter's hand, feeling the temperature of the room return to normal. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel heavy or suffocating. She stroked Mia's hair, trying to comfort her, though the feeling of unease persisted. "Mia, sweetheart, are you okay?" Lisa asked, almost whispering, afraid to break the fragile peace that had settled over the room. Mia blinked slowly, and when her eyes finally met her mother's, a small smile appeared on her lips. But there was something in that expression that made Lisa's heart tighten. "Is he gone?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, he's gone," Lisa replied, trying to sound confident, but deep down something told her the story didn't end there. Mia hugged Lisa tightly, her small hands gripping her as if clinging to life. Mark looked at his daughter, relieved, but visibly shaken by what they had faced. He placed his hand on Lisa's shoulder, trying to offer some sort of support, though he himself was still dealing with the shock. For a moment, everything seemed to be returning to normal, but instinctively, Lisa knew something still wasn't right. The days that followed were calm, but the atmosphere in the house was never the same. Mia went back to sleeping in her room, and though her behavior had returned to what could be considered normal, there was a shadow in her eyes, a sadness that hadn't been there before. Lisa would sometimes catch her daughter staring at the corner of her room, where the shadows always seemed darker, as if she were waiting for something, or someone. A week later, as Lisa was preparing breakfast, she heard Mia murmuring softly in the living room. When she walked in, she saw the girl sitting by the window, looking out at the woods beyond. Her words were too quiet to be heard clearly, but what made Lisa's blood run cold was the tone. That voice didn't belong to a child. It was deep, whispered like a distant echo. "Mia, who are you talking to?" Lisa asked, trying to hide the panic in her voice. Mia slowly turned, her face expressionless, but with a faint, unsettling smile on her lips. "He said he'll be back, Mommy," Mia whispered, her voice strangely calm. Lisa froze. She felt as though the world around her had stopped. The warmth she had felt when she thought they had defeated Daniel was gone, replaced by the same icy chill from weeks before. Her daughter wasn't completely free. He wasn't completely gone. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Lisa forced a smile, but the fear was uncontrollable. "Daniel said he's coming back one day," Mia replied, turning her eyes back to the woods where the wind made the trees sway like dancing shadows in the distance. That night, Lisa woke up again to the sound of muffled laughter. Laughter she recognized. The house, silent during the day, seemed to awaken in the dark hours of the night, and now the certainty that Daniel was still there, that he had never really left, grew inside her. Lisa got up, feeling a presence in the hallway. When she reached Mia's door, she couldn't bring herself to open it. She knew that behind that wood something was waiting, something ancient, something patient, and she knew, with a paralyzing certainty, that the terror had never truly ended. Daniel was lurking, he always would be.